A story of justice, dignity, and the truth that changes everything grabbed their attention immediately. An old man walked into a luxury bank on a Friday afternoon. His clothes were worn, his shoes scuffed, and his hands trembled slightly as he approached the front desk. The bank manager, Victoria Cross, was in a meeting when she spotted him from her glass office. She rolled her eyes and whispered something to her assistant that made them both laugh. "Can you show me my balance?" the old man asked politely, handing over his bank card. Victoria's smirk widened into something cruel. She stood up from her desk and walked toward him like a predator circling prey. "Sir," she said loud enough for everyone to hear, "people like you usually bank at much smaller branches. This is one of our premium locations. Maybe you'd be more comfortable elsewhere." But in less than 10 minutes, that same manager would be on her knees, begging for his forgiveness, and the entire bank would witness something they'd never forget. The viewer is instantly curious. Why would the manager apologize? Injustice is immediately clear. The old man is being disrespected based on appearance. Emotions are triggered. Sympathy, anger, and anticipation build the story slowly and clearly. The old man's identity. Edward Miller was 78 years old. He wore a simple gray jacket that had seen better days, and his shoes told stories of decades of hard work. Most people saw a poor old man, but Edward's mind was sharp as a razor blade, and he carried secrets that would shake this entire bank. 40 years ago, Edward had been different. He worked as an investment banker at the very same institution. He'd built his career brick by brick, earning respect through intelligence and integrity. He'd made millions of bank, brilliant deals that generated record profits. But life had other plans. What happened to Edward when the 2008 financial crisis hit? Edward refused to participate in the fraudulent schemes that many of his colleagues were pushing. While others made quick money through dishonest practices, Edward walked away. He left the bank, left the business, and spent the next decade caring for his sick wife, Margaret. They used their savings for her medical treatments. Cancer. The disease took everything. Her health, their fortune, their future. After Margaret died 5 years ago, Edward had nothing left but a modest pension and memories. He moved into a small apartment, kept to himself, and lived quietly. He still maintained one bank account at the same institution where he'd spent his career, but nobody recognized him anymore. Time and hardship had changed him completely. The bank today. The bank had transformed into something Edward didn't recognize. Gone were the principles of integrity and genuine service. Now it was all about appearance, wealth, and status. Employees wore expensive suits and treated customers like numbered transactions. The culture had become toxic. Managers like Victoria Cross rose to power through manipulation and cruelty rather than competence. Victoria had been with the bank for only 3 years. She was ruthless, dismissive of regular customers, and obsessed with the wealthy. She'd built her reputation by making others feel small, especially those who didn't look like they belonged in her premium branch. Edward's reason for coming. Edward received a letter that morning. His account balance notification showed something unusual. He had received a deposit, a large one. It was from his estranged son, whom he hadn't spoken to in 15 years. The letter was brief. "Dad, I'm sorry it took so long. I've done well, and you deserve to know the truth. Go to the bank. Ask to see your full account history. Everything will make sense. I love you. Your son, Robert." Edward didn't understand. His son had been angry with him, disappointed that Edward had left the banking world to care for a sick woman instead of making real money. They'd had a terrible argument years ago. Edward thought that bridge was burned forever. Now, confused but hopeful, Edward came to the bank where his son had instructed him to go. The premium location on Fifth Avenue. The one where everyone seemed to have money and power. Hashtag make viewers emotionally invested. The humiliation begins. Victoria Cross sat in her office behind glass walls, watching Edward approach the desk. She saw a man in a worn jacket, carrying a plastic bag instead of an expensive briefcase. In Victoria's mind, that meant only one thing. This person didn't matter. She stood up slowly, deliberately, letting her heels click against the marble floor as she walked toward him. Around them, Young professionals in sharp suits pretended not to notice, but everyone was watching. This was Victoria's style. Public humiliation as entertainment. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone suggesting the opposite. "Yes," Edward said simply. "I need to check my account balance. I received a letter about a recent deposit." Victoria's smile turned into something uglier. "Of course. What's your account number?" Edward provided it. Victoria typed it into her computer, and her expression changed, just for a second, but then she recovered, forcing the same dismissive smile. "Interesting," she said, her voice dripping with fake concern. "Sir, I want to be direct with you. Our premium banking services are designed for our more substantial clients. Your account suggests you might be better served by our online banking system. You don't even need to come in person." The message was clear. You don't belong here. Edward felt heat rise in his chest, but he remained calm. "I prefer to speak with someone in person. There was a deposit I don't understand." "Look," Victoria said, leaning against her desk in a way meant to dominate the conversation, "I can see your account shows some activity, but honestly, this branch handles much larger portfolios. The minimum balance for our premium services is much higher than what you have. No offense, but why don't you just use the ATM like everyone else?" Other employees started pretending to look busy, but their eyes were really on this scene. Victoria was showing them again how to dismiss the unimportant people. The cruelty deepens. But Victoria wasn't finished. She gestured to a young associate, David, who worked in her department. "David, do me a favor," she said loudly enough for Edward to hear. This gentleman was asking about his account. "Can you help him at the basic customer desk? We need to keep our premium services available for actual premium clients." The word actual hit like a punch. Edward wasn't actual. He wasn't real. He was just another poor old man taking up space. David looked uncomfortable. He was new and didn't yet understand the culture Victoria had created. But he knew better than to argue with his manager. "Of course, Miss Cross," he said quietly. Edward followed David to a small desk in the corner. Other customers who were obviously wealthy breezed past them, getting personal attention from senior bankers in private offices. David typed in the account number again. This time his eyes went wide. He stared at the screen, then looked at Edward, then back at the screen. "Is something wrong?" Edward asked. "No, just give me a moment," David said, his voice strange. He got up and walked quickly toward Victoria's office. Edward could see him talking urgently to his manager. Victoria looked annoyed at first, then curious. She followed David back to the desk where Edward waited. "There must be an error in the system," Victoria said, but something had shifted in her voice. The cruelty was gone, replaced by confusion. The phone call. Victoria's phone rang. She answered it, listened for a moment, and her entire face went pale. "Yes, sir. I understand, sir. No, I didn't know, sir. I'll take care of it immediately, sir." She hung up the phone. Her hands were shaking. It was the bank's president. Apparently, he received an unusual request from someone very important. Someone very, very wealthy. Someone whose family had just made a massive contribution to a major charity the president sat on the board of. The request was simple. "Make sure my father is treated with respect at your bank." The president had looked into it. Edward Miller's account showed something remarkable. 20 years ago, when his son Robert was just starting out in the tech industry, Edward had invested heavily in his startup, against the advice of every financial advisor. Everyone thought Robert was wasting his time. But Robert succeeded beyond anyone's imagination. His company was worth billions. And Robert Miller had just wired a significant portion of his wealth into his father's account as an apology for their estrangement. The deposit was in the millions. The account that Victoria had just tried to shoo away contained more money than she would earn in her entire career. Hashtag justice, karma, and the satisfying reveal. The truth unfolds. Victoria's face transformed from pale to red. She looked at Edward, really looked at him for the first time. The pieces were falling into place. His quiet dignity, the way he'd remained calm despite her cruelty, the mystery of that deposit. "Mr. Miller," she said, her voice completely different now. I didn't realize that I had money, Edward finished for her, or that I deserved basic respect. The entire bank had gone quiet. Everyone was watching now. Edward pulled out his phone and showed Victoria the letter from his son. She read it slowly, understanding dawning on her like a sunrise. His son, Robert Miller, the tech billionaire, the one whose name appeared in Forbes, whose company was revolutionizing artificial intelligence. That Robert Miller was Edward's son. I'd like to speak to someone who can help me understand what happened to my account over the past few years, Edward said calmly. And I'd like to understand why your bank treated me the way you just treated me. Because I'm guessing I'm not the only person this happens to. Within minutes, the bank's president was in the branch, not the local manager, the actual bank president. He was mortified. He personally escorted Edward to a private office, apologizing repeatedly. The investigation that followed was swift and thorough. It turned out that Edward's account had been charged thousands in maintenance fees for inactivity, fees that should never have been applied. Money that was supposed to be his had been slowly siphoned away by the system. Meanwhile, Victoria Cross had made a choice that morning to judge someone by their appearance. That choice was about to cost her everything. The consequences announced. The bank's president called an emergency meeting with all staff. Victoria was brought in front of everyone. This morning, the president announced, an employee of this bank made a decision that violated everything we claim to stand for. She treated a customer with disrespect based on appearance. That customer, it turns out, is now one of our most significant account holders, not because of his worth as a person, which should have been obvious, but because his son is Robert Miller, one of the most successful entrepreneurs in the country. Silence. Effective immediately, Victoria Cross is removed from her position. She will receive mandatory retraining on customer service ethics before any discussion of reemployment can occur. But more importantly, she will work with this customer personally to restore the fees that were improperly charged to his account. Victoria's face went white. She looked at Edward, who simply nodded. Edward's words. Edward stood up. Everyone waited to hear what he would say. I've been in banking, he said quietly but clearly. I know how this business works. Money is important, yes, but people are more important. The way we treat people, especially those we think can't help us, that's who we really are. This bank forgot that. So, did I once. I chose money over my family, and I lost 15 years with my son because of it. He looked at Victoria. You judge me by my clothes. But you forgot something important. Everyone is someone. Everyone has a story. Everyone deserves to be treated with dignity. The room erupted in applause. Employees who had been afraid of Victoria for years suddenly realized they didn't have to be anymore. Give clear takeaway that reinforces values. 3 months later, Edward Miller stood in a bright, modern office space, his son's company headquarters. He and Robert were finally having coffee together. Real conversation, real connection. I'm sorry it took me so long, Robert said, his eyes wet with tears. I was so angry when you left the bank. I thought you were weak. I didn't understand until I became successful and realized that none of it mattered without you. I'm sorry too, Edward replied. I should have fought for our relationship. Money and career, they're not nothing, but they're not everything either. They hugged, and for the first time in 15 years, there was peace between them. What happened to Victoria Cross? Victoria didn't stay at the bank much longer. The retraining was humiliating. She had to take courses on diversity, respect, and customer service basics. She had to personally apologize to Edward, and she had to work with him to understand the impact of her actions. But something shifted in her. She realized she'd built her entire identity on dismissing others. When she finally understood that Edward, the man she'd mocked, was actually more successful than she would ever be, it broke through her defenses. Eventually, Victoria left banking and went back to school. She studied psychology and now works as a counselor helping people overcome workplace bullying and discrimination. She visits Edward sometimes to thank him for the lesson that changed her life. The bank's transformation. The bank underwent significant changes. They implemented new policies requiring respect for all customers. They created training programs based on Edward's experience. Employees were taught that you never know someone's true worth by looking at them. The toxic culture that Victoria represented was systematically dismantled. Customer satisfaction scores went up. Employee satisfaction went up. Ironically, the bank became more profitable because they actually treated people with respect. Edward's legacy. Edward and his son invested together in several charitable projects. They created a fund to help people who were unfairly dismissed or underestimated by financial institutions. They worked with schools to teach young people about integrity and respect. Edward also wrote a book about his experiences. It became unexpectedly popular. People hungry for stories about integrity and human connection resonated with his message. The book wasn't about getting rich. It was about what really matters. The universal lesson. On a quiet evening, Edward sat in his apartment, not a fancy place, but comfortable now, and thought about everything that had happened. A stranger who sees you only by your appearance can hurt you, but worse, they hurt themselves. Victoria had limited her own humanity by judging people without knowing them. The real wealth, Edward realized, wasn't money in a bank account. It was respect for every person you meet. It was the courage to see past appearances. It was a willingness to treat others with dignity, even when you think they can't do anything for you. Because you never know. You never know whose story will change everything. You never know when the person in the worn jacket might be someone's father, someone's world. A message to viewers. Edward's final reflection was simple but powerful. We live in a world where we judge each other constantly. We look at someone's clothes, their job, their age, their appearance, and we decide whether they're worth our time. But what if we decided differently? What if we treated everyone with the respect they deserve simply because they're human? That's not weakness. That's strength. That's character. And it's what separates people who build real empires, not of money, but of love and respect, from people who build nothing but walls around themselves. Emotional impact and call to action. If this story touched your heart, if you felt the power, dignity, and respect triumph over judgment and cruelty, if you believe in second chances and the transformative power of seeing people truly, then hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. This story reminds us of something we desperately need to remember. Never judge a book by its cover. The people we dismiss might be the ones who change our lives. The quiet old man might be someone's loving father. The worn jacket might hide a brilliant mind. Have you ever been underestimated because of your appearance? Or have you ever underestimated someone and later regretted it? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience might inspire thousands of people to look beyond first impressions and see the real person beneath the surface. Don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss our next powerful story of justice, redemption, and the transformative power of human dignity. Because the best stories are the ones that make us better people. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and share this video. Because the world needs more reminders that every person deserves respect, every story matters, and it's never too late to do the right thing. We'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching. The end.